2020 and 2021 have been quite a shock to our camp community. The clinically inclined would call it trauma. Same as 9/11, a war, or other experiences that can shake the foundation of our emotions. And while society is slowly emerging from the pandemic, things are getting better. The emotional scars will remain for a long time after, for our campers, their parents, and our staff. For this, perhaps the most important topic of the year, and our final show of the season, we bring in the heavy artillery. Dr. G, Debi Gilboa, joins us again to help us better understand the lay of the land in the world of mental health. This is the Day Camp Pod. Welcome back, everybody, to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, Crystal Lake, Illinois.
And I'm Tiffany Grattan McDuffie from Purposeful Play, both in Chicago, Illinois, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And we are Day Camp Pros, dedicated to the professional development of our colleagues, discussing topics and best practices that can improve our organizations and ourselves. Hey, Deb Gilboa, how you doing?
I'm good. How are all of you?
Doing okay, hanging in there. I would think in this world of mental health professionals are in high demand at this point.
That is absolutely true. And I think that one of the great things, I was just having a conversation with a colleague about this today, is that the idea of mental health is now for everyone. It isn't only for people who struggle with mental illness or for people who are caught in the throes of mental distress like grief. It's really something everybody now knows in their fiber and their being. Everybody needs to think about.
COVID silver linings. Here we go. Right? Yeah. I mean, for real, that is 100%. There's a lot less judginess when you say mental health now, right? People know that it's an essential thing. So let's get cracking here. I want to start with just the campers. Let's talk about the campers. Okay. Kathy Fisher, who's our social worker who was going to be on the spot but couldn't make it. And she has been calling some of the kids that have been noting issues in their registrations, called a boy, a 7-year-old boy who was with us last summer when we ran pandemic camp, right? So you think that's great, right? Has not left the house since then, pretty much, right? And I spoke to a parent of a 11-year-old girl, totally well-adjusted kid, is completely defiant with her parents now, like wants nothing to do with anything, just is angry and depressed. So I'm hearing it's not just kids that had a predisposition or were having issues before. It's like normal kids now who are now just really being affected by this. And I'm worried. I'm scared. Camp professional, I'm scared about this summer.
I totally understand that. And I completely think that I understand why, but rather than assuming, let me ask you, what are you worried about? Where do you feel like the pressure points, all three of you, where do you feel like the pressure points are going to be that you're not sure how they'll land with kids, or you're worried about how they'll express what's going on with them?
Go ahead, Sam, you can go first if you want.
All right. I'm thinking the frustration level in social situations is going to be really high because they're out of practice, and they're going to be edgier to begin with. So I see a lot of, at least the beginning of the summer, working out the process of how do we relate to each other? How do we solve this problem without smacking each other? So that's my main fear.
Good rule.
Yeah. So.
And that makes sense to me because one of the things that we know that the hypervigilance that has gone along, and this is really for everybody, even though we're talking about campers, the hypervigilance, that state of being constantly on edge or much more often on edge, one of the ways that plays out is that things that might be a little frustrating, that things are, I'm going to put it in medical terms, that were a 2 out of 10 kind of pain become a 10 out of 10 kind of pain, or scratchy moments become cutting moments. And so what can we do both to help with that ahead of time, right? To prep for that, be ready for that, diffuse some of that, and also just manage it. And some of that is going to be, and I think we're going to talk a lot about this, about using when, not if language with our campers and with our staff and with our parents, about when you find yourself getting frustrated more than you expected, when your emotions feel really too big to control by yourself, what are some things you can do? Or here are some things you can do.
I was all on top of the when language from you last year, Deb, when it was when we have a positive test.
Did it help you to have that preparation?
It helped me because I knew it was going to happen,
Mhm.
but I wasn't mentally prepared for what would then happen. I think, that's that, because that was just the unknown. Tiff, you can answer Deb's question next. Go ahead.
For me, I think like the youth that we serve are just real, they are excited to get back together. So I have less of a concern about them. I think they'll, and this is just my assumption, or I guess my glass half full thinking, that they will be more cordial and more kind to one another because they now have an appreciation for the intermingling that they didn't have before. My concern is far more, our camp is not a traditional camp in the way that we do a lot of out and about around the town. We help to get kids beyond their block, beyond their neighborhood, beyond the city. And so this year we're going to implement the field trips, not necessarily to enclosed places, but to, places that are populated, more outdoorsy, et cetera. And so in years past, we've had some instances where we've had like racial profiling, or it's just like, a lot of Black kids in this area where we aren't usually, and people are just like, oh, they're well behaved, or just like comments that are just like randomness that we've been able to just like, get, let fly over our heads. But now with all of the stuff that has gone on in addition to the pandemic in terms of the racial tensions, et cetera, I think that our kids have this predisposed defense about intermingling. And I think historically I've been able to really, like people are just people and we're all the same, cut us open, one heart, two kidneys, that sort of thing. But I think that the news and media has now like made it like, I don't know, Coach Tiff. So like, how are we going to be safe out here is really more so of the concern that I have.
All right, Coach Tiff, I'm going to be a glass half full kind of person. One of the amazing things that's come out of the last 11 months in this country is a growing awareness of racism. And people are more inclined to check their privilege, to question their biases, and to not be shocked when they're called out on those things or when those are conversations that are happening. So I'm not quite rose-colored glasses enough to say that I think, boy, you'll have fewer of those experiences this year because everybody is anti-racist. I understand that that's not the case, but I do think that the conversations will actually in some ways be easier and be really informed by, so when you use that when, not if language with your campers to say, when you encounter somebody who sees you and makes wrong assumptions about you, what are some things that you think you could say or do, or how might you handle that to educate, to build bridges, or to feel safe and do what you need to do, because it isn't your camper's job to educate and build bridges unless that's what they want to do, right? Unless they feel called to that and they're motivated for that for some reason. But I think that at least the conversations that you'll have with whoever you're getting permission from to go to that place, right? Like if it's not just a park, if it's an event that you get tickets to or something, that those conversations ahead of time might be a lot easier to have than they had been in the past. I will actually flip though and give you a less glass half full view when I say I totally understand and agree that I think for a little while kids are going to be nicer to each other because they're going to be so excited to be back together. But have you ever visited family that you haven't seen in a while and you're super excited to see them and you're positive they won't annoy you this time? Yes. It lasts for like 3.5 days. And after 3.5 days, if we're to keep with the flower theme, the bloom is off the rose, and these people are just as annoying and ignorant as they ever were. And so I don't know, unless you only have 1 week camps, I don't know if you're going to see that all the way through the summer.
Well, I'm just going to encourage it. I'm going to tell them that that's what it is, and I'm going to claim it. I'm going to claim it, and so we'll make the
manifest it.
Yes. And I'll tell them that they're manifesting it too. And then when they manifest,
expectation is that you
when it goes off
more and you love each other.
Yeah, and I
Right.
wasn't saying it to say that there will be no issues, but I just know like the kids that like I have a lot of returners, and so they are legit excited to see one another. So that part is exciting. And we always like, so it's a sports camp, so there's always been all about like team camaraderie and getting along and doing the thing for the greater good. So I'm not as nervous that the isolation for the kids we serve will have made it worse.
You've built a culture, it sounds like, that's really strong, and that will help camps this year for sure. One of the things that camp does really well is culture, and something from the business world, I don't know if anybody says this in the camp world, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So
Oh, it's awesome. Love that quote.
Right. And if you have, or can shift slightly. Another advantage to the pandemic is that things we thought were written in stone, it turns out were just barely written in sand. So if you can take this disruption as an opportunity to shift your culture a little bit in the direction that you want it to be, it sounds like, Tiff, you might not feel like you have that need, but if anybody listening is like, oh, I wish that our culture was just a little bit more like what they're describing, this is a great time to do that, is to say, hey, we're going to focus less on being amazing at tennis when we leave camp and focus more on lifting up other people and noticing when they need empathy. And if you can create that culture, then you will need slightly less strategy about how to handle all those scratchy moments. Not none, not at all none, just slightly less.
Right. So my concern is that I keep hearing this song in my head from my 21-year-old son was like 3, and he used to listen to Thomas the Tank Engine. And one of the songs was, "Don't judge a book by its cover. Don't make your mind up too soon." But anyway, it's always been one of our things to train the staff to not just take things at surface level, right? To find out what's going on. And it's hard for a lot of staff to do that. A lot of staff don't have that like social worker gene to really like start asking questions and digging in there, right? A lot of them just sort of see this and then react to it. And like, this is not the summer for that. These kids are coming off the bus, as I like to say, like a box of chocolates, and we don't know what's going to happen when they get here. They might be, like Sam said, like a bunch of released prisoners, and they're just like, whoa, they may be great for 3.5 days, like you said, and then all of a sudden start, manifesting some weird behaviors. And I'm worried that my staff is going to be so gung-ho and excited because, like, they're being released from prison too. And they're not going to really take the time and be patient. And we had, Professor Dave was on here, Malter, and he was like, just be gentle. That was his advice. Like, tell the staff to be gentle and just, chill and talk to them and all that kind of thing. So that's what I'm worried about, is that they're going to see behaviors and they're going to knee-jerk reaction on it and not do what really needs to be done.
And I am and was the kind of camp counselor that if you told me in staff training, be gentle, I'd be like, you hired the wrong person. I'm a lot of things that fit well at camp, but gentle is not probably in my top 20 adjectives. But another thing that you might try using, Andy, that I think is getting at the same thing that Dave is trying to get at, and that's be curious. We talked about this when I did training with your leadership staff. We talked about how this summer camp may be the first place that some of these kids have felt truly okay in 11 or 17 months. And that 7-year-old that you mentioned who spent pandemic camp with you, but then hunkered down at home and is struggling, it sounds like, to leave home. They get to camp and be okay, right? Genuinely feel safe for the first time in a long time. And like so many of us, when we get to the end of a crisis and finally feel safe, sometimes that's when we lose our minds. Sometimes that's when we unravel, we cry or we yell or we fall asleep. So many educators that I work with have been noticing the kids who've been virtual for a long time, and then their public school, for example, opens back up and they go back. They go to the first few days of school and they're as exhausted as any 5-year-old at the end of their first long day camp day, right? Their first pre-kindergarten 5-year-old who has had half day pre-K and then gets to you and they fall asleep waiting for the bus home because they went swimming and they ran around and they were excited and they were nervous and they were sad and they were frustrated and they were happy and they're just not trained up for a full day anymore. It could be your counselors, it could be your leadership staff, but it definitely will be your campers. And we all know that being exhausted does not aid children in their self-regulation. Or us. I mean,
and then putting them in a competitive situation like a Gaga court or something like that.
Awesome.
Right?
Yeah, I think all the very best things will fly free at that moment.
Yes. Gaga is going to be very exciting this year. That's what we decided.
I have
think
one
that-
other factor that's coming into my camp this summer. Last summer, we were not able to take as many of our children with different needs due to trying to support them at a distance. But this summer, a lot more are coming back. So it was weird to have a summer not inclusive. And now it's almost like starting over with this year. So
Are you worried at all about your staff, that second year staff, and didn't have that experience last year, and them feeling like, whoa, this is another element I don't know how to manage?
I was very lucky that last year I kept only returnees and they're all back again,
Ah.
but they're out of practice again. They maybe during training, do you have any tips for me on how to set it up right for this summer?
I would really address it straight on, and I would ask them what they're worried about, what's not good about having kids with different needs at camp, so that they can express that and you can have empathy for that, and then say, cool, can anybody tell me what is good about it? What's valuable about it? Not just for the kids, but for the camp as a whole, for our mission, for the other kids, for you. And so that way they get to say what feels like you're not ever supposed to say, like, it's hard, it's gross, it's uncomfortable, it's scary, I don't know what to do, I feel incompetent, the other kids say things that I want to say but are inappropriate, whatever it is. And then say, okay, and what's good about it? And then after you've shown empathy for what's hard. And I think that those two things will set them up, especially ending with the what's good about it, will remind them how this ties to your mission. For our camp staff, they are incredibly mission focused, far more than people who work at Home Depot. Even if they're drilled on the mission of the company, camp people are mission focused people, and it makes such a difference to them to remember their why.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let's transition to staff for a second. So we've got high school kids who have been doing high school from their beds. All right. The majority of my high school staff have been doing high school from their beds. The ones that have been going to class, there's like 2 people in class, because the majority of the class has chosen to do high school from their beds, because what the hell? Why not? Right. And then and the college kids too, to some extent. And then you have, kids who are going to class who are separated by 6 feet, some of them with freaking plexiglass. They're not getting much of a social experience either. So, and now they're going to be the ones that are running my social revitalization program with the children.
It's absolutely true. And absolutely that a lot of day camp staff are not high schoolers and are not college age students. We have educators with 25 years experience who are also day camp staff. But I think it's really important to point out that I think a fault line this summer, more than in other summers, and it's always an issue, especially with younger staff, is that they come to work at your camp, yes, for the mission, yes, for the campers, yes, for the traditions and the memories, and also tremendously for their social opportunities. And this year they are like flowers that if they don't get watered soon, they're gonna die. And so they're gonna be soaking that up, and they're just gonna feel like they could not get enough social water. And I think that the issue that we mentioned about fatigue, about not being trained up, I think that both of those things, just like with the special needs issue, acknowledging it right out of the gate and saying, okay, the expectations have not changed. Our culture has not changed, but your needs have changed and your background has changed. I said to my 16-year-old who restarted in-person school for the first time in 14 months this past Monday, when he came home exhausted, I said, "You're weak." I said, "You got to train up." I said, "You got to," because he's only in school 2 days a week. I was like, "Thursday, you've got to like move from your bedroom to our living room after math to go to science, just to remember what it feels like to sit in class and walk between classes." And he's like, I know you're joking around, but that's actually a pretty decent idea. He said, "I cannot believe how exhausting I found this." So if with humor, if that works for your culture, your leadership style, or with empathy, which never goes out of style, whatever it is, if you can, even in your staff training, be like, okay, now we're going to get up and stand over here because your bodies need the practice. and And I think that also with social stuff, if we can say, okay, here's what we think, where are we right, where are we wrong, what's hard about this, and what's good about this, and then tell us what you need in training so that you can be ready to meet our expectations and serve our mission and help our campers by the time they show up.
The social stuff's important. And last summer, for the camps that ran, most of us really veered away from that because we were so petrified of kids giving each other COVID, you know? I think this year they're going to be mostly vaccinated. We need to create, you know, places for this to happen. We need to invite this. They need it. Like you said, Debbie, like it's a priority for their needs. We need to feed their soul.
And I'll put on my medical doctor hat for a minute and say, when you have kids, I know we're talking about staff, but when you have kids outside, the research is looking pretty clear that their social interactions are more valuable to their health than masking and distancing, right? So if you're outside, you can pick one or the other safely and then get kids what they need in terms of mental health.
Yeah. That's pretty profound. And let's just touch on the teachers that you mentioned, the adults that are working at this camp, these poor people who like have no blood in their body. Like I look at them and they're like the Walking Dead.
Are you amazed that they have signed up to work at camp this summer as opposed to sleeping from June 28th to August?
Or just literally going to the beach and staring at the waves for like a month. Yeah. Yes, I am. But they tell me that this re-energizes them and it feeds their battery so that they can actually make it through a school year.
I believe them. You know? I know that that's true. And I would encourage camps for their educator staff, for anybody who's been on the front lines this year, for any adult, because every adult has been managing their parents' health and their neighbors' grocery shopping and their own family, whatever it is to say to them, I love that we are where you want to be this summer. What do you need to make sure that you recharge?
But these people are deniers of what they need. That's the problem. These people, they think they're superheroes and they just want to keep going. And I'm afraid they're going to be like a racehorse that just drops. I'm really worried about that.
So I think it's great to say that you're worried about it, right? To be really transparent. But I think another thing, Andy, I don't know if you were at a talk that I gave for camp leadership at one of the national conferences, but I talked about taking care of yourself as a camp leadership person, as a camp administrator. And I said, I understand that you don't need to. You can ignore your own eating needs and sleeping needs and health needs and emotional needs from May till September. You've done it for X number of years. I can tell you how many years that takes off your life expectancy, but I know you can, not that you should, but you can. But here's what I want to remind you. And it's something that Travis Allison says so often. He had stickers made up. It says, I am always teaching. It's a reminder to you, every person at camp, every staff person, every older camper, every camp administrator is teaching whether they know it or not, because there are people at camp who admire you and they watch you and they think, wow, how does Tiff do it? And if they see that how she does it is by, just going and denying her own needs and not taking care of herself, and they go, okay, that's what I want to do too, because that's what it takes to be like her, and I want to be like her. So if you can remind your staff that you're worried about, that you can't let them burn themselves out, you can't let them model behavior that denies their own mental health needs, because then that's what their oldest campers and the young staff will think they should do too.
My leadership people are literally starting the day after their school ends. They don't even have a break. And yeah, they're 5-hour energy drinks and all that. And I know how it manifests, right? They start getting cranky, just like a kid, right. And they start getting really quick about things. And
just the way of their being curious, like
it's stress. Yeah. I mean, you just start being affected by the stress. And then, the emotional toll of being at camp is going to be great. But you said it yourself, the physical toll for everybody involved. It's going to be like boot camp for everybody for like 2 weeks until they get their sea legs under them. And that wears you down also.
Hey, so here's a day camp hack that I learned years ago with a camp that I consulted with. They were really looking for a way to get their staff to get enough sleep. Now, they were worried about it in week 7 or 8. And I understand why you're worried about it in week 1 or 2, but it will work either way. They gave out prizes $5 Dunkin' Donut gift cards. We're not talking super expensive prizes, but as you know, a lot of staff will do a lot for that coffee and a donut.
Heck yeah, we have Wawa cards in the Philly area, but
Perfect.
yes.
Wawa cards. And, or, sheets, just saying. Anyway, that is a Pennsylvania.
I heard it's great. I heard it's
so they said, if you can show us, those, I mean, this is like in the movie where somebody has been abducted and they have to give proof of life and they take a picture of a newspaper with that day's date. And so if you can show a picture that someone in your family takes of you asleep, with the time next to you, like a clock or a phone next to you.
It says like 7:30.
Right. So they were actually, because young adults can bank sleep, just like kids can bank sleep. So if they sleep in on the weekend, they actually bank sleep. So if you could show that you were, if you had a family member take a picture of you asleep after 11 a.m. on a weekend, you got a gift card. Now, is it possible they went to bed at 5 a.m? Of course, you can't. If you're not gonna chip your counselors, then I don't know how to help you. But having some fun, silly prizes that say we mean it. Get sleep. Putting a couple of Japanese sleep tubes in your staff lounge. Whatever you got to do to show we really value your rest. Another suggestion I have, Andy, and I've done this with a couple of the camps I work with, who've said, look, we're not paternal, we're not parental over our staff. We don't want to say you have to take better care of yourself, but we're worried about exactly what you guys are worried about. So here's what we've said. Cool, you do whatever you do, but we need to know from you, what are your yellow flags? Not red flags that you're crashing and burning, but what are your yellow flags that you are struggling with your reserves, your mental health or your physical reserves, any of that. And they say, so just tell me, what are the things that you notice? And I can give you an example for myself. If I lose stuff, if I set my keys down, can't remember where I left them, if I can't find my phone, if I can't find my walkie, whatever it is, that's a sign that I'm at the end, that like my fuel gauge is running low. That's just one of my things. If I forget that I told you I would have a meeting with you and I miss it, that's a sign that I'm running low. So asking your staff ahead of time, 2 questions. What are signs that you're running low? You're an expert in you. I'm not trying to tell you.
Great stuff.
And number 2, what do you need when we see that? I'm going to notice it before you do, because that's how low reserves work. So give me permission. What can I do to help you recharge or to remind you what you need to go do in that situation? So that's giving them autonomy. That's giving them respect. That's recognizing their expertise in themselves, but saying, I need permission to keep you up to our mission level, mission competent.
Dr. G, can you work at my camp this summer?
We want to do our contract negotiation right here. I feel like that's awkward.
Oh, that was awesome. I love it. Just want to hold on one sec, because I want to give it up for CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, the fine purveyors of the best recreation solutions to keep camp going strong. These people have been supporting us. Now, this is our 3rd season, Sam, the Day Camp Podcast, and they've been there since the beginning. So I want to give a shout out to Commercial Recreation Specialists, to Rich Wills, to Ron, and to the crew out there in, like, I don't know where they are, like Wisconsin or something. But they support all camp things, whatever conference, whatever initiative we're doing, and the Day Camp Podcast. They've got the water trampolines, the slides, the Zoom flumes, all that stuff. They got Concrobium with the Playtech stuff for you to spray and keep everything clean. And they're just really great partners of the camp industry. So thank you, CRS. We'll hopefully see you again next season. Coming back, I wanted to go back to the kids for a sec, something related to that. And Debbie, you and Tiff, who are the active parents, can contribute more on this, because Sam and I are like, whoo, thank goodness our kids are out of the house during this pandemic. Wow. Oh, we lucky. So just take me into the minds of the parents, so that camp professionals have an idea what's going on at home with these kids, with their parents. Because I could just say that if I was home with my parents, if my kids were 7 and 5 or something like that, right, I'd be at like the end of my rope right now. I'd be like, this is it, I'm done with this. Like, I'd be very curt with them. I wouldn't be able to do all this wonderful Dr. G stuff with them. I just wouldn't, because it's been, like you said, 11 to 17 months of frustrations and dealing with, and now they're going to come into this world of camp with all these aggressively friendly people who are going to be like, hey, everything's wonderful. You know, it's going to be like a shock to the system. I wonder about the weird dynamic.
What do you think, Tiff?
Well, I think the parents are going to be celebrating, right? Like as long as they get back safe,
Sure.
and they're just going to be like, whoa. And so I think kids are just little people. So I think the kids are also going to feel the same way, like, I got rid of my mom for the day. You know what I mean? I think that'll also, but these are my rose-colored glasses, give them something more exciting to talk about, give them something more, you know, like a new thing to like cultivate the after school, after camp conversation. I do think, well, one thing that you said, Andy, that I have experienced personally is like kids who have like this very adverse situation happening at home, and then we're at camp like life is cupcakes and rainbows, and they're looking like cut it out, or they're looking like I can't trust you because I don't know cupcakes and rainbows, so why, like this seems weird, you know what I mean?
Got
like,
what they are.
or you think like, and even as extreme as like, oh, you think you're better than my mom because she's not cupcakes and rainbows and you're cupcakes and rainbows. So you know, like they just have this weird dynamic. So I think that it's just, I always say that the curriculum of camp is social emotional education, right? And so we are all here about the feelings, and to be able to talk it out and to be able to talk it through and pair people who are weak in one thing up with someone else who's strong if they need, you know, like a younger person. I I think we're equipped, right? Like I think that there's no other place. I think there's lots of places that kids are going to go this summer that don't have the type of oomph that camp counselors have, especially established camps with long tenures. Andy, you're going to be fine.
I know, I'm
You'll
just
be fine.
worried.
No, just worrying about tomorrow is like
It's my empathy. I got a lot of empathy.
I think worrying about it is one of the reasons we know you're going to be fine.
Yes.
But I think, Tiff, that you're totally right. I think that camp has, I cannot tell you how many groups of parents I have said to this spring when what they bring me, Andy, what I'm hearing is that people are having two issues. One is, tell me my kids are okay, right? They haven't died of COVID, thank God, but there's this other huge worry, which is that what have we done to our kids by having to keep them inside and having them go through this? And I keep reassuring them, actually, it hasn't on balance been as bad as we were worried it would be for kids' mental health. It's been much harder on older teens and adults than it has been on children. That other generations have gone through this of kids. Polio, kids had to stay inside for a really long time. And that was like my parents' generation before that, it was the Spanish flu 100 years ago. So it's not unheard of for kids to go through this experience and survive it as a generation, but they're worried. Can you tell me my kids are okay? And conversely, can you get them what they need, right? So, and camp is what they need. They need the chance to have fun with less worry. But I think that one place, and I always think this, so people have learned with me before will be like, oh, she's just using this as an excuse to say that. But I always think that camps should show off their expertise about that social and emotional well-being. So if you can send home reliably, and parents are going to notice it once out of 10 times, but if you can send home reliably once a week or once a day, here's the word we're talking about today. Try using it with your kids tonight and asking them what they learned about it today. And that word is curious, and that word is empathy, and that word is kindness. You're modeling for parents the kinds of conversations and the kinds of skills their children are capable of when they are not at all sure that their kids are even capable of throwing their own socks in a laundry basket anymore because they stopped asking in October. Right. Because they just don't have one more red blood cell to get the kids to do something. So given that, any social and emotional leading you can do, this is really a great year to step into it. Not in any kind of, we're better at this than you, so we better teach you, but like, hey, we discovered some stuff, our camp Liberty Lake discovered some stuff today about empathy. Ask your camper what it was. So if you come home with a sticker, like my kid came home from day camp that said every day, ask me about karate and tie-dye. But if it actually said, ask me about karate and empathy, then this is the summer for that. It's going to help parents with things that they are both deeply worried about and also have forgotten they can affect change regarding.
Right. And go ahead, Tiff.
Oh, you just said so many things that have me like lighting up. So one is the ask me about sticker. Like I've not seen that, but I know when we would go to women in camp, they had t-shirts that said ask me about summer camp, and everybody asked me about summer camp, right? So we're going to get the kids some stickers that say ask me about, because oftentimes parents will be like, how was your day? And it's just closing questions, good, nothing else. But if you have ask me about stickers, that cultivates the conversation. And if you have a word of the week, then that also bridges the gap. So like the parents are using the language and the camp is using the language. So the kid sees like, oh, there's togetherness, like, oh, everybody's doing this. And so it becomes a way, what's happening at home is the same as what's happening at camp. And it creates the same camp culture in the home space. So I really, really love that.
And let me interrupt right there to say that one of the cool things I've seen, I've gotten a couple of camps to do what they're asking me about, is the counselor writes 2 things and asks the kid what they want their parent to ask them about. And they put that as the last thing.
I really love that. The other thing I was going to say before we get too far, when you all were talking about ways to help staff practice self-care, is when I do work with women and in with corporate women and executive trainings, the way that we get them, because they never want to like play games and they are notorious for burning out. We do self-care bingo. So we just have them hang them everywhere, and I'll send you one, Andy, so that you can put in the show notes, and then maybe people can hang that in their staff rooms, and people can, that'll be another way to incentivize them to practice some self-care. And I think that the modeling is everything, because that's also the thing. Managers in the corporate space will be like, oh, get some self-care in, you should take care of yourself. But when the staff sees the manager burning out, they know they're really not allowed to do that, right? Like they know that they really shouldn't be doing it. So I think that the modeling example earlier was really, really good as well.
Right. I just want to reiterate something that Tiff said at the beginning, like about 5 minutes ago at this point, when we were talking, I was worried about the parents, because that's another thing too. I think that day camp professionals are used to taking a lot of shrapnel from the parents anyway, and stressed out parents, they're going to worry about taking more of it. Right. But I do agree what Tiff said, that the parents are just going to be so darn thrilled to send the kids this year. Brandy, who works with me, who has a 5-year-old, she says the highlight of her day is dropping her kid off at school now that her kid is finally back at school, that she's literally just like hands off to the traffic guard and just like energy just bolts through her body, because
Yesterday I had my first moment in this house all by myself during the day in 14 months. So if you heard the angels singing from Western Pennsylvania, that was my house. And I think to Tiff's point, I think that if 5 and 7-year-olds were on Facebook, they would get on that school bus and be like, finally away from the parents in 14 months.
So mutual, like
out of the white hot intensity of the spotlight of their love.
And it's no shade, right? Like they're like, we love you, we want to come back, we want to see you once it's all over, we need a break.
I need to be away from you so I can miss you and love you more.
Yes, we are going to be providing essential worker service for parents. There is no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
I think we'd be remiss though if we didn't talk about the kids who are going to have more trouble with separation anxiety than they usually do because they haven't had the practice this year.
Sure.
And the parents who are going to have a little bit more separation anxiety because during a time where we were very, very hyper vigilant and worried, we've said it's okay to keep your kid right next to you all the time, even while you're at work, even while they're at school, we can koala with them. And so it's a learned behavior to separate from our children. It takes like 18 or 20 years to get decent at it. And we all necessarily regressed in that for the last year. And so I think having empathy for that, not necessarily trying to solve it. Yes, we have to solve how we help kids and being really clear with parents of all ages what our procedures are for separating when a kid is struggling. So however your camp handles that, not just talking to first-year families about that this year, not just talking to your 8 and unders about that this year, but 11-year-olds, some of them are going to need that this year, and even 13-year-olds might need that this year. So just that when, not if language about when it's hard in the morning. There are a bunch of different reasons it can be hard in the morning. It doesn't mean camp was the wrong choice.
Mm.
And some of that is trust too. Tiff said earlier about being rainbows and unicorns or whatever. And sometimes people will be like, you're too cheerful for me. That, I can't trust this. But then they realize after a while that I'm that way all the time. That's just who I am.
It's not
So,
fake. Right.
yeah. So getting that trust factor in the new situation is going to be a challenge, I think.
Authenticity is incredibly important to this generation of parents as well as staff. And transparency, you don't have to be transparent, but you have to be honest. So you can't lie, you can't make stuff up. You can say, oh, hey, I can't talk about that. Or that's, how much coffee I drink is not really important, but you can't lie. And that authenticity really matters. And so saying, hey, I think from the look on your face that my optimism and cheerfulness is a lot for you to take. You would not be alone in that. I promise you it's real. This is actually how I am. It's why I work at day camp, because it's one of the few places it's acceptable to be like this at work.
Absolutely.
Yes. I've heard the term like toxic happiness, and I'm always like, what is that? And I can agree that we have to feel all the feelings, but like, I do not understand people who like talk about people who have an optimistic outlook. Like, I'm just like, okay, then sulk. Like, just it's your choice. Just sulk. You can have that. So I've had that same exact thing happen, Sam. They're like, she's always so happy. I'm like, oh, trust me, I cry. Like, trust me, I get stressed. I feel all the things, but I just know how to bring myself back.
Here's the list of Disney movies that make me cry.
And here's the list of real life hard things that make me cry, right? Like, I feel all the emotions, but I just know how to bring myself back to that. And I just want people to know that it's possible, and it doesn't mean it's inauthentic. So
well, I mean, that's a great tip for this summer for camp leaders, which is not just being authentic and honest and all that stuff with the camp parents and all, but for your staff. They need to understand what you're going through and all that kind of stuff. And I think that for years, a lot of camp leaders sort of just had to like put up in a front, of like super positivity and everything's great and all that kind of thing. And never really had any real conversations with their staff. And now it's got to be all real. No doubt.
The other thing that we've done, and I've given this as a tip before, that movie Inside Out, where like it was all the feelings. When the kids come in camp, they would pull a clip to say like where they felt like they were for the day, so that we kind of had a gauge on what they were feeling. So if you have a bad attitude, or if you're being mean, we pretty much already knew, because you told us from the beginning that you had, a bad attitude. And so maybe even for the coaches to like gauge themselves as well, just so that it's like that introspective check on where you are, and maybe where they are at the beginning and where they are at the end, and like a conversation about something like that. One fear or one question I do have is like, my camp is all about movement, right? Like, movement is our movement. And we were always, and a bunch of camps are like all anti-tech. So kids have been tied to it, right? From school to everything, like tech has been where they've been. And so I guess, do you have any suggestions? Because it's always been hard on like the language that we could use to really motivate them. Because when you were speaking about how exhausted they would be, for those who didn't have the privilege of being out and continuing to be active, I can imagine it's going to be, I do think that could cause some really, whatever the angry emotion is at my camp, because we are moving all summer.
I think that it is, and this is going to be an issue for staff as well. One of the things we need to remember is that teens, especially, and older, we get oxytocin from those devices. Every time we get a notification that somebody we love pinged us, or somebody that we think is really fun posted something, it gives us that feeling of connection. And we are all addicted to oxytocin. It's important for our sense of well-being. So when I'm working with camps and doing pre-camp trainings, we'll often talk about how to approach that. What's the expectation at camp, and what's your reality before camp? And how do you make that shift? Do you need to slowly move towards it? Do you need to be really intentional? Do you just need some when language about, when that's hard, or when you really miss it, or when it's frustrating? Clear boundaries. This is a time you can check. These are not times you can check your phone. This is when you may have devices, or you may never have devices. Clear boundaries that are hopefully modeled by your senior staff. And then for campers, I think just if you're not going to change your rules about tech, and I'm not suggesting that you should, empathy. Not, but aren't you glad to be done with it? Or you'll see how great it is eventually. Not making them buy in, or they are terrible as people, that this is a great thing, but saying, It's hard, huh? Is it harder this year? What's hard about it? Is there anything good about it? And I think you may find that by the end of camp, they have different answers to, is there anything good about it? But the first few days, they may be like, no, there's actually nothing good about it. This would be better for me if I had my device.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking a whiskey bottle away from an alcoholic at this point, right? I mean, it's just like hardcore, which is a weird segue into AM Skyer is a leading insurance partner for over 101 years. AM Skyer has been supporting camps in PR, legal, health, facility management, general safety, and more. Experience the AM Skyer difference at amskyer.com. And again, I want to thank AM Skyer has been with us since the beginning, 3 years now running, helping pay for our production team of Matt Hansberger. That's pretty much it. Putting it all together. Yeah, Matt's the man. And I did a crossover episode on Matt's first class counselors the other day. Hopefully that'll be out soon. But anyway, AM Skyer has been doing a great job during this pandemic. They've had a series of webinars called like, let's do this together, and about the ERC, you know, as far as getting tax credits, as far as transgender kids in camp. They just had one. I mean, all kinds of issues that are bubbling right now, you know, and getting people ready that, you know, because remember, you know, the bulk of camps did not open last summer. So a lot of the camps that didn't open are going through the things right now that the camps that did open last summer. And I know firsthand, that was rough. That was real rough. So thank you, AM Skyer, for shepherding camps to opening this year. We really, really appreciate it. And they are about as positive as they can be. So amskyer.com, check them out. All right, so we're about to wrap up. And I just want to say that if we could just get one little morsel, because Deb is like the queen of the morsels. Like, so you talked about curiosity, right? You know, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, like you know, just some last advice that we can bestow upon our counselors who need to all of a sudden get much better at validating emotions and listening and all.
I'm going to yes and something that Tiff just said, and that is, so when you come see me at my office or I do a house call on you, I would never sort of visit without vital signs, without checking your pulse and your temperature and your blood pressure. In that same way, it really is a good example of being curious. If you figure out which chocolate in the box of chocolates you've got that day from everybody you can, and you can't check everybody's vitals every day, but you can check most people with a really quick check off. You know, whether it's a little slip of paper on every counselor's clipboard, or it's the unit head walking around and checking in with the staff while the staff walks around and checks in with their kids and just says, you know, circle this, you know, where you are on the angry face to the smiley face today, like we use for a pain scale for younger kids, or give me one word to describe your emotions right now. However you do it, if you can be curious at any given point about how people are. You mentioned at the very beginning, Andy, of this episode that we're talking about people who've been through trauma. Trauma means an experience that either changed your own sense of safety or made you question some of your personal beliefs. And for most people, the pandemic has been that. And when people have trauma, they need trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care is just a shift from what's wrong to what happened.
Wow, it's good stuff. I could listen to this forever, as I'm sure many people could.
Yeah, that was a really great morsel.
That's a killer morsel. Don't get better than that. I also I want to add that just before we got on this podcast, we were sent in our podcast, in our Go Camp Pro Slack group, we were sent a morsel from this feedspot.com. I don't know what they are, what validity they have, but they named the Day Camp podcast the #2 camp podcast in the world. Okay, so I just want you to know, Camp Code girls, we're coming for you. All right, coming for you. All right, you guys got a head start.
Well, we love you all.
We love you. We are inspired by you.
I just want to tie you for first. That's all.
That would actually, that's real 1990s camp right there. Real 1990s camp. Would you believe that in my first day camp job, right, in the 90s, I was a sports specialist, and I was told that the goal was for the kids to have a tie because they didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Talk about screwing kids up, right?
Dr. G's face is priceless right now.
Yes. Oh, and you know, also before we go, Dr. G mentioned that she did a staff training with my camp and my sister camp, Everwood, and it was spectacular. I went to both her sessions at ACA National. I went to her session at Tri-State. She is a master of the Zoomage, I have to say. She has taken this virtual training thing to the next level. She really has honed it. And by the way, she'll come to you also. So Dr. G, why don't you how do people find you, get in touch with you, and what could you do for them?
Easiest way to get in touch with me is either through my website, which is askdrg.com, or email me. We'll put it in the show notes if that's okay, but it's drg@askdrg.com. And I am absolutely scheduling staff training. So if I can be helpful to your leadership staff or to your frontline staff or both, I hope you'll let me know.
Yeah, or the parents. You do parent talks too.
I do, absolutely. I've noticed the camps are kind of out of the season for that now. That's
no, I don't know. I did a town hall last night I did one for my returning staff last night. I'm doing new staff next week. And there were moments where I was getting asked questions in the chat and I was like, damn, I wish Dr. G were here.
Awesome.
Because of all these things you're saying, like these kids that are home that are going through all these different, issues, I mean, camp directors, we're really good at a lot of things. Okay. But in this realm of mental health, you need mental health professionals around you. You just do. Okay. This is not something we can wing. Okay. Not this summer. Okay. You need to rope in people like Dr. G and your local people that you have that do this kind of thing, that have kids in camp that can come to your camp. Of course.
Absolutely.
Of course. All right, cool. By the way, I stepped on it a little bit. It's drg@askdrg.com, right?
Thank you.
Okay, you got it. I want to thank the Go Camp Pro team again, Travis, Beth Allison, Matt Hansberger. All right, of course, AM Skyer and the commercial recreation specialists allowing us to bring this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, subscribe, review, help us out. Come on, we want number one. We need to get up there. All right, check out the show notes of this episode and all our other episodes at daycamppodcast.com, as well as contact info for the show, for Dr. G, and for my wonderful co-hosts, Sam and Tiff. Thanks for listening. And by the way, this is the last episode of the season. We'll be back in September, but we've got like 70 episodes in the can that you can listen to. You can listen up. If you love Dr. G here, there's 2 other ones with Dr. G you could listen to. You can get more of your Dr. G fill. All right. So anyway, we'll see you again in September. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great
Bye.
summer. Kick some butt. Okay, I think Tiff said it well. Dr. G said it well. We have what people need this summer. We are the real vaccine for the kids.
Gospel truth. And
Right?
and also the vaccine, please. Okay.
Yes, get your damn vaccines, please. All right. We'll see you next time on the Day Camp Pod. Bye-bye.